You have an interview with us on file. How is your spectral friend?
Stepping into her car, Reed listened to the soft purr of the new electric engine, a stark contrast to the guttural roar of its predecessor. Adjusting to her rearview mirror, she takes in the sleek lines and gleaming polish, and she gleans a note left behind. "You're welcome, Sean." To both her amusement and slight annoyance, a pile of crumpled wrappers, greasy testaments to late-night food runs, laid beside her. Reaching over, she bundled them all into a plastic bag with a plastic flick, the gesture flowing with ease. With the click of a seatbelt and preparing for her drive, she catches a familiar sight in her rearview mirror. The face of a sour veteran. "Thought you said that you weren't talking to me anymore," she remarked, her voice dry yet laced with a hint of humor. Joe mumbled something incoherent, a sickly tone lacing his usually gruff voice.
"Figured I'd stay anyway. Nobody else seems to want me around,"
he finished with a thick cough laden with a mucusy tone. The spirit shifted uncomfortably within his seat, trying to maintain a sense of stoutness. "Most coughs would warrant a 'you okay' from me," Reed drawled, her voice laden with satire. "But something tells me ghosts don't catch colds." It was a backhanded question, true, but Reed wore skepticism like an armor. Yet she couldn't resist another concerned glance at Joe through the rearview mirror. He seemed dimmer since the last time she saw him, more spectral. The edges of his form seemed to evaporate. The spirit's gaze was empty, almost as if they were losing connection to this world. Turning fully, she met his empty gaze. His usually gruff expression had dissolved into a hollow mask devoid of its usual defiance. A pang of something uncomfortably close to fear flickered within her. It was fleeting, like a firefly in the night, but powerful enough to surprise her. "You look like..." She started, struggling to find the right words for him. "Like you're fading. More than any time I've seen you like this."
"Well, in this case, I think you might be right, Private."
Joe seemed to speak with an exasperated tone. His head nodded to either direction every other moment as if he was nodding off. A wry smile tugged at Reed's mouth, trying to stave off the negative emotions. Seems even ghosts can get bad news. The amusement in her voice didn't reach her eyes, which narrowed in on Joe. He appeared to be fading faster, his edges shimmering like heat waves rising from asphalt. Reed had only experienced a handful of exorcisms in her time as a mage. The smell of the air only confirmed her worry, a deep metallic tang that lingered just at the back of her throat. It was the scent of a fading presence, a ghost nearing the point of no return. It only takes a few moments for a ghost to become an unrecognizable amalgamation of regret and pain, a poltergeist. Joe stirred yet again, his gaze finally landing directly on Reed. A struggle flickered in his eyes, a battle between a clear purpose and the weight of unspoken truths. When he spoke, his voice was hesitant, his words carrying the burden of secrets that seemed true yet felt incomplete.
"They said somebody ended up getting out. A real bad type,"
his voice quipped.
I tried asking more about it, but before coming back, but..."
As the car drove, Joe's gaze shifted out the back window, trying to put his energy into recalling the events. The car lulled into a brief silence. "Escaped? When?" Reed finally broke the quiet, her voice a low rumble. "Escaped from where?" She kept her gaze fixed ahead, wary of any displays that might spook the spirit. Joe wasn't exactly known for emotional stability amongst her spectral guests. Joe again mumbled something, then cleared his throat. The sound like wind rustling dry leaves.
"The gate,"
he rasped, looking anywhere but her. Reed was a creature of habit, her internal GPS on autopilot as she steered towards her pre-planned destination, back home. But the urgency in Joe's fading form threw a wrench in her plans. Her hand veered left at a familiar intersection, against her best wishes, the worn leather of the steering wheel cool against her fingertips. But her mind was already miles away, trying to unravel the condition plaguing her phantasmal friend. Just as she reached the stop sign, a notification buzzed insistently on her phone. Her eyes are only barely able to make out the message. "Unknown number. My name is Dante Jenna. I've been taken somewhere and I have no idea how to escape. I'm bleeding and hurting. I needed an ambulance. I think I'm..." The message pulsed across the screen, each stark word a desperate SOS cutting through the static of her ordered world. Her stomach lurched. Kidnapping? What kind of game was this? Yet a sliver of unease seemed to wedge itself in between her current situation and the message. Though it seemed to hold a weight beyond words, a pull she couldn't ignore. This message contained magic. A tendril woven through the very fabric of the text tugged at her senses like a spectral gust of wind. It took only a moment of hesitation before she felt the undeniable pull of the unseen forces. After some time on her detour, Reed would make her way over to one of Brigmoore's landmarks, a combination gas station diner known as Earl's. It was tucked away near the center of the city, just outside the Times Square. But this landmark contained a secret. It held Reed's hideout. It was one of the few places in the city that received just enough foot traffic for both more complex spells and components. In this case, the component was souls. It would be the place where she could at least momentarily help Joe. The overcast evening led to the gas station's fluorescent lights casting a halo above the building. Reed entered, Joe trailing silently behind her, the murmur of regulars playing dominoes and reading newspaper filling the air. Reed ducked behind the counter, offering Earl a curt nod. His usual salt and pepper hair had devolved into a mess of wood-blowed strands, and the hairline that had once marked a strong brow seemed to be retreating further and further each week. Disheveled, sure, but only one thing mattered to Earl these days, the comforting clink of coins in the register. Hey, it seems like a full house. Her practiced smile was ever present as she spoke and opened the second register, her movements honed from years of experience. 20 minutes, that's all she needed. 20 minutes of normalcy before the next unsuspecting soul walked in. With a practiced eye, she spotted her target. A man radiating a distinct lethargic aura, seemingly unaware of the spectral hitchhiker clinging to his shoulder. A spirit of a woman, who was drenched in sand that seemed to trail behind the two. The man approached Reed's counter, his gaze vacant and shoulders burdened. As he placed his items down, Reed discreetly reached out, her fingers weaving a silent spell. The spectral form clinging to the man flickered, confused and disoriented. Just as the spirit tugged towards the silver necklace adorning Reed's neck, the man seemed to expunge a cough filled with an uncomfortable wetness. Reed's face barely is able to contain the mild sense of disgust, but feeling her necklace pulse gave her a sense of ease. "Have a nice day," she managed out. The man gives a shy nod to her before disappearing out the building, his lethargic energy fading as he goes. Just as the spirit entered her necklace, the unseen energies became hostile, trying to attack the necromancer momentarily before dissipating, likening the feeling to static electricity and creating in voltage all across her body. The usual ease of guiding lost souls was replaced by an unsettling resistance, a struggle against the usual pull of the amulet. Earl lumbered over, his deep voice shattering the tense silence behind the register. "What would I do without you, Red? You're a lifesaver." His voice was thick with applause. Reed forced a smile. The weight of the encounter and the unnerving anomaly left her feeling like she lost that sense of ritual. But now, back in her cluttered haven behind the store's curtain of function, she finally had time to help Joe. Reed managed to slip in the back, hiding just behind the storage area next to the kitchen. She could finally enter her hideout. With a sigh, she pulled out a familiar board, symbols etched on its surface akin to ancient, unrecognizable script. The spirit inside her necklace served as the key for this ritual. Joe manifested beside her, his form barely visible even with her sight.
It's been a while since we've needed this. Are you sure you still got it?"
He spoke with a cough. "Yeah, I got it. All I need is their name." Reed closes her eyes, trying to focus on the hum of unseen energy that whirled within the necklace. The form of the person who had once been. It took some time, but then the epiphany brought forth from the base of her mind. Otney rose. The necklace landed on the inscribed board with a dull thud. Reed began the incantation, her voice a low murmur that vibrated with a strained power. The cryptic language heavy on her tongue twisted and turned, laced with Otney's name spoken with a force that belied the tremor in her hands. Pain, acceptance. A storm of emotions roiled beneath the surface. The spell took hold. A faint shimmer dissipated from the necklace, but a niggling unease gnawed at her. It felt incomplete, a melody missing a note. As she attempts to complete the spell, she feels another presence appear at the back of Earl's, then stops. The usual crackle of energy was muted. The response was sluggish. The forces of the underworld, usually eager to claim their due, seemed hesitant and resistant. Reed grit her teeth, pushing her magic harder. No, further. The effort leaving her mostly drained. Finally, with a flicker and a faint pop, Otney's essence dissipated, leaving behind just enough spectral energy to remedy Joe. Disbelief and worry battled within her as she cleaned the residue, the act mirroring the weight of her actions. This wasn't right. Somewhere, something was disrupting the delicate balance between the realms, but she couldn't dwell on it, not now. Joe, translucent and fading, shimmered before her.
"I guess you were right. I guess it'll be a long time before you lose your touch with the craft."
Joe says, barely able to keep himself audible. Focusing with a renewed determination, she channeled the meager energy into the spirit. His form solidified with a thrum, and the faint tremor ran through his spectral hand as he touched hers. Relief warred with a deeper sense of unease within Reed. "There," she muttered, her voice laced with exhaustion. "You'll last longer now, but remember, this isn't a permanent fix." Joe, his eyes filled with a flicker of gratitude, nodded silently. The debt she owed him grew lighter, in an act they both understood. But for now he was anchored, a flicker of existence preserved by a stolen echo.
Yeah, I know."
Joe's voice is much more pride and gruff as he reforms, sitting idly on a beanbag nearing a set of old milk crates. The faint chirp of a dying phone battery cut through the hum of the gas station, reminding her of Dante's message. Time, ever relentless, ticked by. Reed's gaze remained glued to the map of Brigmoore and its sprawling neighboring cities, its grid lines etched with worry and different types of notes. Just as she honed in on Brigmoore's map, searching for an echo of magic or distress, Joe's voice startled her.
"Thank you."
His form shimmered, no longer the fading wisp from before. Reed paused. The sarcasm she'd practiced died on her tongue. "You're welcome, Joe." In recent memory, few things had caused her this much internal turmoil. The spectral pain in the ass was somehow tugging at her humanity, demanding something more than her usual indifference. As the two shared a fond moment, a sudden pull in the unseen forces made itself known towards the back end of the store. Another mage was here, drawn by forces unseen. Maybe, just maybe, she could convince them to be her unlikely partner in this rescue mission. The thought was unsettling, the idea of collaboration jarring against her solitary nature. Yet the weight of the unseen outweighed Reed's solitary nature. With a determined scowl, Reed tore the map up from her whiteboard. Tonight, the grimy haven of her store hideout would transform into a recruitment ground. This mage, whoever they were the key to Brigmoore, to Dante's plea, and maybe even the solution for Joe's plight. If and only if they said yes.